Reading an article last week in The Conversation, which if you don't visit that website regularly, you're missing out on some really intelligent argument for and against various global issues. And this one was titled Climate Crisis, What to Consider If You're Questioning Whether to Have Children. And one of the authors of that article, Jasmine Fledderjohann, who is a senior lecturer in sociology at Lancaster University, joining us now via Zoom. Jasmine, a very good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me.
Anecdotally, I know of, because I'm of an older generation. I'm talking about the generation of my children. I know plenty of people who are saying, no, I'm not going to have children, and their primary reason is around the planet, the future of the planet, and do they want to bring a child into a future which is as imperiled as ours seems at the moment, and the other is wanting to keep as small an environmental footprint as possible. I mean, is there evidence that this is an increasing, if not global trend, then an increasing trend in some parts of the globe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that initially we sort of had anecdotal evidence, but increasingly we're seeing research evidence to back this up as well. So, we've all heard the reports. The UN Environmental Program has, released their emissions gap report saying that we're on course for a 3-degree Celsius rise. Only a 14% chance that we're going to stay below the 1.5 degrees recommended by climate scientists. And these statistics are linked to concerns about rising sea levels, conflict and displacement, extreme weather-related disasters, global threats to food systems and food and water security. So I think against this backdrop, it's probably unsurprising that there's a growing evidence that people are concerned and that those concerns about the climate crisis are affecting people's decisions about whether to have children. So one recent study from a team from UCL, University College London, reviewed published evidence. So research evidence published between 2012 and 2022. And indeed, they found across this research that people who were concerned about the climate crisis typically wanted to have fewer children or even no children at all.
And is that because they don't want to offer this uncertain future to any offspring that they might otherwise have chosen to have in a more certain global future, or because of the environmental impact of having that child, or perhaps a bit or a lot of both?
Quite a bit of both. So I think there are two really broad themes. They cover quite a bit of the themes that are talked about most frequently, but two of the broad themes are overpopulation and sort of overconsumption related to that. And then, as you say, uncertainty about the future. So this overpopulation theme sort of centers on the idea that you might have guilt about your potential child's carbon footprint. And that's linked to an idea that the reason that we're struggling globally to live sustainably is because there are simply too many people and we are living beyond the Earth's limited resources. But this idea of overpopulation as a concept is actually very problematic. It has a very political and a very contentious history, and it's been floating around in various forms since about
Does
the
it?
18th century.
Because I mean,
But it's led.
it seems to me, Jasmine, that I don't know, a family living in the rainforest in Gabon with 5 children is having almost certainly a considerably low environmental impact than a childless couple in Manhattan that have all the mod cons.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important thing that's missing. So these overpopulation arguments, they really frequently are used to problematize the fertility of marginalized people, particularly from the global south. But they ignore the fact that it's not just about how many people are on the planet, but how sustainably we're living that really matters. So focusing on overpopulation really misses who is contributing the most to carbon, but also misses the fact that fertility reduction is frankly just too slow a solution for the climate crisis.
And those whose fear for the future is such that they don't want to bring a child into that future. I mean, because my childbearing days of sort of 30 years ago, that stopped being an option for me. It's kind of hard to think myself into the shoes of somebody who's in their mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, mid-30s. I think the evidence is that particularly in the developed world, people are having children later. I can't think myself into the shoes of somebody saying, I don't know what this world is going to be like in 20 years, and I don't want to offer that world to my child. That's a real concern for a sizable number of people, is it?
It is a concern, and I think the concerns range from what you might consider slightly more mild concerns around, damaged ecosystems and the fact that children won't be able to enjoy nature in the same way that we do now, to really very drastic concerns such as, people citing concerns about full societal collapse. And when you think about the environmental damages that we've already seen, habitat loss, species extinction, displacement of people, climate-related conflict, these are serious concerns. And we know that people around the globe are already experiencing catastrophic consequences of climate crisis, especially in the global south. And that's really impacting on reproductive justice, right? The idea that everyone has the right to have a child, to not have a child, and to parent those children in safe and healthy environments. So the climate crisis is a barrier to the realization of those rights.
Yeah, and it may well be that I'm adopting a kind of condescending attitude towards large swathes of the global south, but my sense is, and I've traveled a fair amount through rural Africa, is that there's very little choice in this matter. There are very few women who are occupying a space where they can say and get away with saying, I want one child only. So the kind of the choice to have a child or have only one child or have no more than two children is in practice not available, I think, to large parts of the global population.
Yeah, and I think I'll highlight a study from the Population Council in Zambia. So in 2021, they did a study of droughts in Zambia. And one woman said, the six children that I desire may not have enough food to eat, right? So here she's highlighting that, food insecurity is indeed a pressing global problem, and it's one that's due to increase with the climate crisis. And she's talking about that uncertainty as influencing her childbearing decisions. But other people in Zambia said, actually, we want to have more children. Because children are a source of security, right? They're a source of financial and labor support. So that uncertainty can sort of operate in both directions. And then, of course, exactly as you say, there are social structures on top of that, gender, availability of contraception, and so forth, that further complicates the picture.
And I think, in my reading, the global evidence is that the more developed, economically developed a society becomes, the more economically free a society becomes, the more people choose to have fewer children. So you have the situation where economic growth depresses the birth rate, but at the same time increases carbon-producing consumption. So it's a kind of it's a difficult dilemma.
It is a difficult dilemma. And I think that one of the key points around this uncertainty is that, we do have political challenges that are underpinning the climate crisis. And there's legitimacy to this uncertainty about the future, but it's not too late to address these points. So I think the key is that these are collective problems. These are political problems. And as you say, they're linked to economy, they're linked to social structures, and we have to have a collective solution. We can't sort of place all of the burden on individual people to change their fertility behaviors. It's not effective and it's not fair.
I won't say that I've read everything coming out of COP28 at Dubai, but I haven't read anything about the topic that we've been discussing.
No, nor have I.
Should we have?
Um, well, it's an interesting point. I think absolutely we should. I think very often reproductive rights get sidelined. It's a very easy topic to sideline, unfortunately. But as I say, these are large scale collective problems, and I think particularly they are influencing people's fertility decisions. And there are, industry is one of the big polluters, right? Industry is a huge contributor to the climate crisis. Private jets that people are flying to COP28 on. These are huge contributors to the climate crisis, and yet individual people are feeling sort of guilt and pressure around their fertility desires. So I think there's a disconnect between what's happening at these sort of large events that are supposed to be solving these large scale problems and the reality in people's day-to-day lived experiences and the reproductive choices that they see as being available to them.
Jasmine, thanks very much for your time and your thoughts. Really appreciate it. Dr. Jasmine Fledderjohann, a senior lecturer in sociology at Lancaster University.